So it's official. AI slop cannot be copyrighted. Hey, my squids, it's your favorite cephalopod, the prize winning squid, back with another video. If you're new here, welcome. If you're returning, welcome back. I'm an artist who likes to do illustrations and webcomics, and my webcomic Taliah is up on globalcomics.com, Webtoons, my website, artbytheprizewinningsquid.com, and my Patreon, patreon.com/theprizewinningsquid, where I release everything early and release tons of behind the scenes stuff and work in progress shots and talk about the comic and world building and all that good stuff. So if that is something that you're into, go over there and subscribe. And then on this channel, we talk about art and art related drama. So if you're into that, subscribe here as well. We also view some of my speed paints while we're talking about it. And make sure you guys are hitting the new hype button, because that thing tells YouTube to share me to as many people as humanly possible. Anyway, subscribe here as well. We're going to get into what I mean by AI slop just can't be copyrighted. Our speed paints for today are actually going to be 3 of them. It's going to be related to my comic, so it's going to be the Chapter 3 cover. Chapter 3 is called Moonwalkers, and it features the main character, Lara Orta, the deep red moon in the background, and something ominous leaning over her. And then 2 characters that will kind of show up in Chapter 3. We have Cleo. Cleo actually showed up at the end of Chapter 2 briefly. And then Sadie Cross, who is Lara's old-time friend and old bandmate. So throw that up on the screen. Let's get into what I'm talking about, though. So if you didn't know, the U.S. Copyright Office, and I want to say maybe the Supreme Court Patent Office, I know, did this as well, but they essentially were like, yo, if humans were not involved in the creation of a thing at all, it cannot be copyrighted. So there has been an artist, his name is Stephen Thaler, and he has been essentially trying to get it so that he can copyright one of these pieces that was spit out by his own AI technology that he created. And it's been shot down. So I'm reading this from Reuters. It's the U.S. Supreme Court declines to hear dispute over copyrights for AI generated material. I'll actually just throw it up on the screen real quick. You guys can kind of just like see it. I'm going to just have it scroll for a second, but I'm going to read this to you guys. This is March 2nd, so this is very recent. The U.S. Supreme Court declined on Monday to take up the issue of whether art generated by artificial intelligence can be copyrighted under U.S. law, turning away a case involving a computer scientist from Missouri who was denied a copyright for a piece of visual art made by his AI system. It's just slop. Plaintiff Stephen Thaler had appealed to the justices after lower courts upheld a U.S. Copyright Office decision that the AI-crafted visual art at issue in the case was ineligible for copyright protection because it did not have a human creator. That is the crux of all of this. There's no human creator, no human intervention. Thaler of St. Charles, Missouri, applied for a federal copyright registration in 2018, covering a recent entrance to paradise visual art he said his AI technology, Dabus, created. I'll throw up the piece that it created, and I will not lie to you. This looks like absolutely trash pixel art for a trash video game that was in the bargain bin of an old video of like an old Circuit City or something, because no one would ever look at this and be like, I feel something from looking at this. It looks like trash. It's absolutely horrible. The image shows train tracks entering a portal surrounded by what appears to be green and purple plant imagery. The Copyright Office rejected his application in 2022, finding that creative works must have human authors to be eligible to receive a copyright. And this is the only thing I will say politically in this for right now. But the current administration, which was the administration then, had urged the Supreme Court not to hear Thaler's appeal. So this is one of the reasons why it was kind of denied. The Copyright Office has separately rejected bids by artists for copyrights on images generated by the AI system Midjourney. So we already knew that part as well. Those artists argue that they were entitled to copyrights for images they created with AI assistance, unlike Thaler, who said his system created a recent entrance to paradise independently. So I think that's important. I think the grade of AI assistance will come into question, whether it's doing so much heavy lifting. And of course, they're not going to say whether they had to show their work in progresses, time-lapse videos, or explain exactly what they used and how they used it. But I think that probably did come into play, and that is one of the defining factors of this. A federal judge in Washington upheld the office's decision in Thalier's case in 2023, writing that human authorship is a bedrock requirement of copyright. The U.S. Court of Appeals for the District of Columbia Circuit affirmed the ruling in 2025. Thalier's lawyers told the Supreme Court in a filing that his case was of paramount importance considering the rapid rise of generative AI. It is not of paramount importance. It's just that your client, who I don't know if Taliah is an artist, I don't know anything besides what this article is saying, but if they were really an artist, they would probably just do their stuff, right? And then that would be copywritten. But because they used a whole other thing to just spit out something, it's like trying to have ownership or copyright a CVS receipt just because you purchased something. You can't copyright that, dude. Like you received a piece of paper. That doesn't mean you can suddenly copyright it, right? But his lawyer is obviously going to argue for his case. My thing is it's not of paramount importance. And it doesn't matter that your client did this. Humans have been creating art for thousands upon thousands of years. There is nothing that AI does, and we'll get into that discussion here in a second, but there's nothing that AI does that actually supersedes what humans have already been doing. So that it literally makes no sense. It's not of paramount importance. Anyway, continuing. With a refusal by the court to hear the appeal, Thalier's lawyer said even if it later overturns the Copyright Office's test in another case, it will be too late. The Copyright Office will have irreversibly and negatively impacted AI development and use in the creative industry during critically important years. Just like the paramount importance, these aren't critically important years. We've been doing creativity, and the creative industry has thrived without ever needing any of this stuff. So everything that you're saying makes absolutely no sense. Although the Copyright Act does not define the term author, multiple provisions of the Act make clear that the term refers to a human rather than a machine, the administration said. Supreme Court previously rejected Thalier's request to hear his argument in a separate case involving prototypes for a beverage holder and a light beacon concerning whether AI-generated inventions should be eligible for U.S. patent protection. His patent applications were rejected by the U.S. Patent and Trademark Office on similar grounds. So, I'm going to get into why this is important, but I want to get to the crux of the copy and interpretation argument, because this has been the massive thing that AI sloppers continuously will be like, well, human artists copy from other artists, and then there's always the copy and stealing, whatever the motto is that people say. But I need to boil down to what this really is and why people saying human artists steal all the time, they copy all the time, and this is no different than that. It is. So these AI systems, they can't interpret. Obviously, you had to feed it tons and tons of data, and then what it spits out is never actually original. You can look specifically at what it's spitting out and you can go, I know the artist you got that from. You quite literally can look at it and be like, I know where this comes from. I know what style this is, because it can't interpret, it can't create, and can't invent. It can only take what's already been there and copy this little part, and then we're going to fuse them together. Not, I'm going to blend them together and make them make sense. No, we'll just fuse them together. And I think the most obvious example of this was, I can't remember where I saw it. I think probably Reddit. But it was something saying, I can generate new animals. And all of the animals that came out looked just like every animal we already have. But if you look at the way an artist will, say, for instance, take a duck and an alligator, and somebody says, put these together. So the first obvious haha is going to be somebody putting like the duck bill on an alligator body and just putting teeth in it. But an actual person who's like, I make monsters, I make creatures. This is my wheelhouse. The first thing they're going to do is they're going to start looking to see what are the pieces that define these animals themselves, right? So a lot of people will be like, well, the duck bill. Well, what if it's not actually the duck bill? What if it's how their feet are used, the webs on their feet, the way that their feathers are used? For the alligator, it might be, you know what? It's not going to be the scaling. It's not going to be the jaw. It's actually going to be how short their feet are. It's going to be their underbelly. It's going to be their tail. An artist will take this stuff and start interpreting. They won't just like draw the alligator tail. They'll be like, how would this function on a new body that is shaped differently, but could be used for a similar purpose, right? That's what an artist does. But AI, it can't do that. It can't think outside of that. It has to already have been shown an example of that thing. So it just copies and pastes. And there's going to be people who are like, well, I can get it to do A, B, C, then get it to do that. But as soon as it does, show me how original that is. Because if I put that in something and say, show me what the original artists look like, their work, it's going to spit out the original work. It can't interpret. It can't invent. It doesn't have that capability. So this is one of the reasons why I think the stealing versus the interpretation argument, it gets lost on a lot of people, right? So I did a previous video. I showed it was like any roll on X, and they had a whole thing where on one side they were drawing just shapes, and on the other side it was just spitting out this anime image. And of course, in that video, I insinuated that I wasn't sure what was going on with, the prompts and stuff like that. And some people were like, hey, they're putting the prompts for different things in there. But my question then is, why is it that the image that was spit out on the right, I can take that and I can literally drop that into X, and it's going to get lost in the sea of all the same anime looking thing, because it literally can't come up with a new anything. It can't do an interpretation. So one of the things you can do as both an artist, and if somebody is trying to tell you specifically like, oh, you can invent new things with generative AI. Take like 3 poses, right? Put them in front of 3 different levels of artists, and then put them in front of somebody who's using Gen AI. So the beginner artist is going to look at the poses, and of course they're a beginner artist. So one of the things that I always tell beginner artists, or just anybody, if you're trying to work on something, you're trying to figure something out, trace it. And some people in the comments, some people might watch this and be like, no, you don't want to trace. Yes, you do. One, it's not bad to trace. Tracing can be good. It can help you build muscle memory. Like, okay, lines connect this way. They feel this way. This is how it feels to draw this thing, right? That doesn't mean trace everything. It means trace to learn, trace to figure out how things work. Or if you're somebody who's like a comic artist, you're tracing your own stuff. Because I did see somebody ask on Threads the other day, it was like, is it okay to trace your own stuff? And it's like, yeah, you can trace your own work all you want. Who cares? But comic artists do it all the time. It's to save time. You trace and to keep things consistent. Because if you have a character that is hard to draw, and you want to keep them consistent from panel to panel, and they're not really like turning, or they're not moving too much, or you even have like, oh, I drew this angle before of this character. Trace that angle that you drew from before to keep it consistent. That everybody does that. It's not even a freaking secret. So the beginner artists or the younger artists will trace, right? They'll trace the pose because maybe they can't look at the pose and figure out how the shapes work. Or maybe they might even just like trace over where the shapes are to figure it out. And that's fine. The intermediate artists will be able to look at it and be like, okay, so I don't know if I want to draw the pose exactly, but I'm going to interpret how the pose is and kind of lay it out. And so the way that they'll do it is they'll go through and they'll kind of like check that they're doing the pose correctly. They'll have their reference there. But what they draw and what the pose is might not be one-to-one. They might have changed something a little bit or even tweaked it a little bit so that maybe it looks a little bit different. But their anatomy might still be similar to whatever their reference is. And that's just because maybe their knowledge of anatomy isn't big enough for them to take it and just like break it out and do whatever they want with it. The last person, the professional artist, is going to look at that thing and go, I'm going to interpret this, but I know how to do anatomy. I know how to do exaggeration. I know how to break things apart so that when you look at it as a viewer, even if it anatomically is completely incorrect, your eye makes it make sense. And that's because they know how to do this interpretation. They know how to make somebody who has a torso that's this big but legs this long, and you're not looking at it and going, that doesn't make sense, because they know to balance how the arm length looks. They know how to balance how the head looks and how big the head is, so that when you're looking at it, you go, ooh, I like that art style. But you like it because it makes sense, because their interpretation of that pose was capable of giving you that. Gen AI will take that pose and layer stuff on top of it. And that's it. Because it can't interpret that pose any other way. Unless somebody says, well, I told it to do elongated claymation. Is that because that already exists? Is that because it already exists? That's the only way that you were able to do that? That's how that works. So when the copyright office literally is like, you can't copyright these things because no human intervened, it's because they know for a fact this took other people's stuff and just pushed it together. They know for a fact that you're not the person that actually created this thing, right? But if an artist, for instance, if somebody wanted to, you love foxes or something, you want to do this really weird elongated fox, and maybe it has really big beans and its tail is massively bushy, and it has different streaks in its hair and this, that, you can do that. Why? Because when they're looking through your application, they're looking at your piece and they're comparing it to billions of other pieces that they have the ability to look at. This is new. This is original. This has not been done before. It's very obvious that you are creating this thing off the top of your head. That you're not just using something to copy paste. And so it goes further for the people who are like, well, I used assisted AI. Here's the problem with assisted AI. It's already building off the backs of people who already had their stuff stolen. What you created after that, it still doesn't matter if AI was part of that process, was still assisting that process. But if, for instance, somebody spit something out and you went, I'm going to reinterpret this, they can't then look at your stuff and be like, that's my original. No, it's not. This didn't come from Midjourney. This is literally my interpretation. It's not a one-to-one. I didn't copy and paste any of your stuff. This is the strength of what the human mind is. And this is why I think when people try to use Gen AI and they try to like think that AI is like this thing that gives you imagination and creativity, it doesn't. What gives you imagination and creativity is your own brain. It's your own ability to look at something and go, I'm going to make that look completely different. The things that I'm going to do, I've never seen before. There are people who are doing things where I look at it to this day and I go, I still have never seen anybody do anything quite like this. But there are people who think that Gen AI can spit out something that is new and original, but it can't, because it can't interpret. The human mind is all about being able to interpret our surroundings. That's why we're able, when we're doing art, we're able to break things apart. We're able to, as you get better at art, you can identify like weaknesses that might be in your piece, that you're starting to do your sketches, you're starting to lay your hands in, and your whatever, you're putting your eyes together, and you can look at it physically and go, oh, there's something wrong with the way that this is working, and I need to fix this. Because you can look at something and your eye and your mind can interpret that this does not look right, even if you're breaking things apart to make them look completely different. One of the things that I just recently watched, it was a video, and it was about riot artists. And it was about how somebody, I believe on X or Twitter, was showing how all of the riot games, League of Legends most especially, but how the splash art is not correct. Quote unquote, is not correct. and how they're breaking apart and showing how these people are breaking the anatomy of these characters, that literally things like their spine would have to be separated to be in certain positions. The arm would have to be dislocated to be in this position. Head would have to be, dismembered and then placed on the shoulder at this angle for it to make sense. And when you see it, when you see the corrections, you go, oh, wow, I didn't realize it was like that. But you didn't know, because your brain interpreted how this is supposed to look. Why? Because that art, it's not just that singular artist. When you're doing splash art, it's going to be a couple people who are like critiquing certain things and saying, hey, let's fix this, or actually, let's correct this and this. It's not a committee, so to speak. I mean, some places might have committees, but it's not just going to be just the person working on the art who is making those decisions. It's going to be some other people, especially the art director is going to be part of that process. But these people know how to break things apart to make them look cool, so that when you look at the splash art, you're just like, man, that looks cool. You don't know that the spine is actually separated on that character, that the hips had to be turned at such an angle that it physically couldn't be possible for that person to stand like that and to hold the gun like that, or that their arm in that position would have to be much shorter than how it's actually, painted and drawn, because these people have the ability to break these things apart to make them make sense. But AI can't do that, because when it tries to do things like this, it doesn't know how to actually do interpretations. So when you try to have somebody do a riot kind of splash art, it looks wonky. It looks weird. It doesn't make sense. That's because AI doesn't know how to do any of that. It doesn't look at anatomy and know immediately, I know how to break this apart. I know how to make this make sense. It just doesn't have that ability. And that is why, quite literally, Gen AI can't do art. It can't do anything original. It can't interpret anything. It can't invent. It can't make anything that makes you go, yep, that makes sense. Especially people who are trying to do these horribly AI slop, like movie trailers. Oh man, Hollywood is cooked. And it's like the most generic, not even generic. It is quite literally the worst anticlimactic thing you've ever seen in your life. Because people don't understand that the reason why we are into the things we are isn't because somebody's power level is over 9,000. It's because all the stories around that. It's because of what they bring to the table outside of that. But you only look at that one thing. You only interpret that one thing. So that's all you're seeing from it. And you think it's just the battles. No, where the battles become cool because of all the other parts. It's not because the battle was cool. Battle is a tiny part of what makes a lot of these characters cool and why we latch onto them. But people who don't have any creativity don't understand why creative people are the way they are, why they love making the things they make, why they do the things they do and interpret just lines and shadows and lighting the way that they do. They think it's just to be cool, look cool. And a lot of the time, it's not. It's to tell a story. It's to give a reason for us to be there, to be emotionally invested in said thing. But they'll never understand, because that's not what they're after. Anyway, that's it for this video. I really wanted to talk about this. I honestly had a whole other video planned. And this one, I was like, you know what? I'm going to talk about this. The whole other video was actually going to be one of the page videos. I was going to actually talk about a couple pages from my webcomic and kind of just like as the speed paints forum were going on. But that's going to be on my Patreon. It will come to YouTube. I'm not sure when yet, but those videos will come to YouTube, just much slower than some of these like normal videos or whatever. But anyway, I'm out of here. I appreciate you guys just watching this. If you guys have any opinions, any comments or whatever, leave them below. I interact with pretty much all of my comments. There's some comments I just don't interact with, and it's usually people who just want to be combative with me. So most comments I do answer, or I do at least read. I do read all of them, but some of them I probably won't respond to. Just, you know the type, man. But anyway, I'm out of here. I love you guys. Thank y'all for watching. Be safe out there. It's getting a little bit warmer out there, so I know people are out there trying to get out there and have fun, but be safe. Con season is about to come in full swing, so stay healthy as well if you guys are going to cons. I'm going to try to hit some cons this year myself, so hopefully I see you guys out there. And if not, hopefully you guys come back and we can talk some more. But I'm out of here. Prize winning Squid is out. Y'all have a good one. Love you. Bye.